Hi, welcome back to one more session under the General Classes Act 1897. In this video today, I'm going to explain about rules of construction under the General Classes Act. Rules of construction. What is construction? Construction means drawing conclusions on the basis of the true spirit of the enactment, even though the same does not appear if the words used in the enactment are given their natural meaning. Simply, construction is nothing but based on the words of enactment giving a conclusion, means interpreting or explaining its meaning, that is called construction. So based on the terminology explaining the enactment, to explain that enactment, how these general clauses will be helpful will be explained in today's class. Rules of construction. Section 5 to 13A. Section 5 to 13A of the General Clauses Act 1897 deals with the rules of construction. The rules of construction. Section 5 to 13A deals with the rules of construction. Under that, first section 5. Section 5 of the General Clauses Act 1897 stipulates that coming into operation of enactment. It deals with coming into operation of enactment, where any central act has not specifically mentioned a particular date to come into force, it shall be implemented on the day on which it receives the assent of the Governor General in case of central acts made before the commencement of Indian Constitution, and or of the President in case of an act of Parliament. So this section deals with how that legislation act are came into enforce, means its operation will be when that establishment will be takes place. For example, the Companies Act 2013 received assent of President of India on 29th August 2013 and was notified in official gazette on 30th August 2013 with the enforcement of section 1 of the act. Accordingly, the Companies Act 2013 came into enforcement on the date of its publication in the official gazette. Means actually Companies Act received the assent 29th August 2013, but when it is notified in official gazette 30th August 2013. So here this Companies Act 2013 came into enforcement on the date of the its publication in the official gazette. That means 30th August 2013 only it came into operation. Where If any specific date of enforcement is prescribed in the official gazette, act shall into enforcement from such date. Coming into operation of enactment, here we need to observe that any specific date of enforcement is prescribed in the official gazette. From that only that enactment came into enforcement. For example, SEBI, Stock Exchange Board of India, SEBI, issue of capital and disclosure requirements, Fifth Amendment Regulations 2015 was issued by SEBI wide notification dated 14th August 2015 with effect from 1st January 2016. Once again I am repeating, SEBI regulations 2015 was notified date 14th August 2015 with effect from 1st January 2016. Here, this regulation shall come into enforcement on 1st January 2016 rather than the date of its notification gazette. Why? Because the date is already mentioned in that act. Even that notification released in official gazette 14th August 2015 only, but in an act it is mentioned enforcement date, that is 1st January 2016. So where if any specific date of enforcement is prescribed in the official gazette, that date only came into existence. That is about section 5 of the General Clauses Act deals with coming into operation of enactment. Here two things to be required. So any act to be enforced, President assent is compulsory and the date of enforcement also required. To interpret or to construct any enactment, the date of enforcement or the operation of that act is required under section 5 of the General Clauses Act. Next, coming to section 6. Section 6 of General Clauses Act 1897 deals with effect of repeal. This section deals that where any central legislation repeals any act, the repeal shall not revive anything not enforced or prevail during the period at which repeal is affected. Affect the prior management of any legislation that is repealed or anything performed or undergone. Affect any claim, privilege, responsibility or debt obtained, ensured or sustained under any legislation so repealed. So section 6, how that repeal will affect during the construction. Here there is a case law to deals with section 6. Under section 6, effect of repeal, there is a case law, that is State of Uttar Pradesh versus Hirendra Pal Singh, 2011 case. In this case, Supreme Court held that whenever an act is repealed, it must be considered as if it had never existed. If it had never existed. From that, we can conclude that object of this section. Object of the repeal is to obliterate the act from statutory books except for certain purposes as provided under section 6 of the General Classes Act. Just before I read out some provisions under section 6, that is effect of any claim, privilege, responsibility or debt obtained, ensured or sustained under any legislation. Except this, once act is repealed, it means that it had never existed. That is about section 6 of General Classes Act. Next, section 8. So here section 7 is not that much important with respect of explanation point of view. We have to read out as it is from the bare act. So no explanation is not required for section 6. That's why I am skipping this section 6. Next I am going to tell about section 8. Section 8 deals with construction of reference to repealed enactments, where central act or regulation made after the commencement of this act repeals and reenacted with or without modification any provision of a former enactment, then references in any other enactment or in any instrument to the provision so repealed shall, unless a different intention appears, be considered as reference to the provision so reenacted. So to understand this section, there is a case law, that is Gauri Shankar Gaur versus State of Uttar Pradesh, 1994 case. In this case, the Supreme Court was held that every act has its own distinction. If a later act merely makes a reference to a former act or existing law, it is only by reference, and all amendments, repeals, new law subsequently made will have effect unless its operation is saved by the relevant provision of section of the act. Means, to take as a reference of a repeal act, it is a condition, it is a required condition that it must be saved, SAVED, is saved by the relevant provision of the section of the act. In new enactment, in new act, after amendment, after repeal, it should be mentioned that saved section to take it as a reference. that deals about Section 8 of the General Clauses Act 1897. Next, Section 9. Under Section 9, it deals about commencement and termination of time. In any legislation or regulation, it shall be sufficient for the purpose of excluding the first in a series of days or any other period of time to use the word from, and for the purpose of including the last in series of day or any other period of time to use the word to. Means, to prescribe any time period, it is required to use the words from and to. This is the about Section 9 of the General Clauses Act. Next, Section 10. Section 10, Computation of time, where by any legislation or regulation, any act or proceeding is directed or allowed to be done or taken in any court or office on a certain day or within a prescribed period, then if the court or office is closed on that day or last day of the prescribed period, the act or proceeding shall be considered as done or taken in due time if it is done or taken on the next day afterwards on which the court or office is open. Means, when a proceeding is has a pending, have to move on that particular day, it is there is an holiday, that proceeding will be continuing next commence day when that office or court will be open. Here, to explain, to understand the Section 10 of the General Clauses Act, there is a case law, that is K. Sushal Ratnam versus Divisional Engineer NHS NHC Tirunelveli. In this case, the Madras High Court was held that since the last date of the prescribed period was subsequent to the date of notification, declared to be a holiday on the basis of principles laid down in this section, the last date of prescribed period for obtaining the tender schedules was extended to the next working day. Next, Section 11 of the General Clauses Act. Section 11 deals about measurement of distances. In the measurement of any distance for the purpose of any central act or regulations made after the commencement of this act, the distance shall, unless a different intention appears, be measured in a straight line on a horizontal plane. Means, in any act or any legislation, if distance is prescribed, the measurement of that particular distance is measured as prescribed under Section 11 of the General Clauses Act. Next, Section 12. Section 12 deals with duty to be taken pro rata in enactments. where by any enactment now in force or hereafter to be in force, any duty of customs or exercise or in the natural thereof is liable on any given quantity by weight, measure, or value of any goods or merchandise, then a like duty is liable according to the same rate on any gender or less quantity. Means if anything is related to weight or measure or goods related to, that should be follow as per section 12 of the General Classes Act. Next, section 13, gender and number. In all legislations and regulations, unless there is anything repugnant in the subject or context, words importing the masculine gender shall be taken to include females, and words in singular shall include the plural and vice versa. Okay, to prescribe gender and number of any legislation or any enactment, it is required to follow the section 13 of the General Classes Act. From section 5 to 13A need to be followed to construct any act. Construction is nothing but to interpret in the court of law. This is about rules of construction under the General Classes Act. Hope that you are understand. So it is not that easy to understand by listening or watching one time. It requires many times to get a perfection. Hope you will do it, and it is required to follow the bare act of the General Classes Act to understand the provisions of these sections. Why? Because due to lack of time, I didn't write the provisions, just read out the provisions. Once follow the provisions according to the bare act. Thank you.